Who knew that people loved reading about the houses and buildings that they live and work in? Let's talk. Good morning, good day, good evening, wherever it is you're watching from. My name is Rob. This is my mom, Caren, and this is Books, Banter, and Beyond. And we're going to do a few shows actually in the next couple of weeks about nonfiction stuff. We haven't done nonfiction yet, so I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think it's underrated, honestly. A lot of people don't really read it, and I don't know why. Maybe it's, too clinical. I don't know. But today's pretty interesting, and I know it actually kind of thinks of Grandpa a little bit because I know he was an engineer, so this kind of made me think of him. But one of the pretty big popular genres here is architecture. And it's not really weird why, right? What is it, America Architecture Digest or something like that? Architectural Digest, that's what it is, yeah. Right. And I love looking at the pictures, but there's
Rob, fun fact, did you know that your Uncle Gene's rooms in his house have been featured in some of the architects? Yes,
very cool. There you go. I got family in famous magazines. Cool. But it's actually stuff like that that's really cool. But I was diving deeper a little bit into it. And did you know that people actually want to know how their houses, how their buildings are built? It might be obvious, right? But at the same time, I didn't realize how important I think it was to people. And especially in a day like today, when safety is a big concern, people want to know that what they're living in or what they're working in is safe, right? So just kind of go throw back and forth a little bit about some ideas. So for me, the reason why I love reading architecture books is to see how my house works, how to make sure that if something breaks, if something maybe isn't up to code, I can then call the right person and go, hey, I know this house might have been built, in the 50s. And, maybe we need to update this because it's probably not sturdy. It's not up to whatever. Or something as simple as, is this pipe under my kitchen sink? Is it working correctly? Is there a problem? And if there is a problem, how can I, as a homeowner or renter, do so? And I'm sure, growing up, I never noticed it in our homes, but I'm sure you and Dad, when I was younger, that was always on the mind, right? You always had to make sure that everything was functioning, And I think the one story that I think of is our pool, when we were building the pool. And I think you told me something about how they almost went too close to the lines and the electric. Well, what kind of things go through your mind when you do have to build something like that from maybe a parent perspective?
Well, obviously, you want to hire the professional that has good ratings, that knows what they're doing. And in our case, we tended to put a pool in wherever we moved. I mean, it was one of those things we call the guys and they'd say, oh my gosh, it's the Glassers. They're putting another pool in. And, you have to trust the people that you're working with. What I find fascinating, Rob, as you're talking about this in terms of what the architecture books do for you, I always look at architecture books from a totally different standpoint. I look at them as beautiful coffee table books where you can open them up and look at the different images. As I said, my brother, your uncle, actually has rooms in there. I've been in his house. I've seen the rooms that are in there. And for me, it gives me ideas, not for what's under the house or in the house, but how to decorate my house and how to create beautiful spaces. So I think it's interesting that we have totally different ideas, which is why we're bantering, right? About what architecture books do. And yes, in fact, when we would do pools, to that point, we would look at pictures and then hire the person that would then make sure it was built correctly. So I didn't have to worry if the pipes under it wasn't, hooked up or something.
Right. And just to go off on my end too, people like Frank Lloyd Wright, who are the big names in this stuff. After, reading a lot about him, watching, specials on him, it kind of took you to a different area. And I know a lot of museums nowadays, especially in Los Angeles, they do portray the architecture of California. And you see it in how the buildings are made. You see it in facts like, we're on a fault line in California. So all of our buildings are extra stable or should be. And this is from reading of it. I would guess that the original architects who built the land had to read what they were going to be doing in order to make sure that it not only was up to code, but it
Well,
was
yeah, let's
like you said,
clarify this.
visually appealing.
The architect is responsible for the visual aspect of what that building is going to look like. The structural engineer, which is what your grandfather is the person who is responsible for making sure it will stand and not fall over. He is one of the very few amount of engineers, structural engineers, that are licensed to go in after an earthquake and say,
Right.
tag versus yellow tag versus you're okay. It didn't make him very popular back in the day when the Northridge earthquake happened. Um,
Right.
the architecture, the architect comes in and layers on top of the structural engineer's actual building of the building. So I want to clarify that it's not the architect that says the pipe's going to go here. The only reason why the architect might get involved is visually, if he says, I don't want a post here, which is where the pipes were going to go, right?
Right.
So they have to work in concert. They have to work together. You can't have one without the other. So,
No, and that's fair. And I mean, I think I know you watch HGTV. I have as well in the past. I think there's that whole blend of thing. You have the guys who are physically building and
right,
physically make sure everything is there, and then you have the other team that comes in and says, "Okay, now let's beautify it. Let's make it pretty."
right.
But it is kind of funny though how even though I know what the words definition are, for some reason architecture makes me go to the structure as well.
Well, because when we lived in Northern California, I don't know if you remember, in the Civic Center where the courthouse was and everything,
Okay, yeah.
that building is actually a Frank Lloyd Wright building.
Oh, okay.
He
Okay.
actually built. He was the architect behind that building, which I always felt was fascinating because here you're going into a place of law, and it was built by this amazing builder architect,
Right.
amazing. But they're scattered all over the place. There are communities in Los Angeles that have these homes that are built by these, and it's not just Frank Lloyd Wright, and I cannot remember a single other one, but there are some other very, very famous home builders that if
Right.
you're lucky enough to have a Frank Lloyd Wright home, how cool is that?
No, it is, and I think and you hit the nail on the head. I think visually, you want not only a stable home, but you want it to look good. And I think you want to make sure that after the fact that your home or even your workplace. I mean, we haven't talked about work buildings, but the same thing.
Right,
I feel like when you're talking about a workplace, that's even five times the severity because you have thousands of people inside of a
right,
building. I
right.
mean, obviously people know historical events where buildings have fallen, have been destroyed. But generally, it's a whole nother level. So you go from a house where maybe you have three people living to a building that has 2,000 workers. You got to make sure that not only is the structure stable, but you got to make sure that that it fits, it works. And places like LA, places like New York, places like Texas that have a specific feel.
Right,
Those guys are going to know what looks
right.
the
Well,
part,
I
right?
think it also how it resonates emotionally, how it resonates culturally.
Yeah.
What do you think when you look at the building? What do you think when you walk into the building? And I think that's all part of the bigger picture. I love architecture. I mean, I love having books and looking at the beautiful images of the homes and the business locations that have been designed. I mean, I would go so far as is the architecture on the rebuild of the towers when the towers,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I know that they put out, we're looking for the right person to create that design for
Right.
the architecture. So and now it has a place in history.
And then on the other hand, right now with the hurricanes going on down in
Right,
Florida, you can you had guys who just rebuilt it from the past one and
right,
now are rebuilding it again, but they're upping the strength a little
right,
by little. So you're in a place that happens all the
right.
time. Your job is to say, okay, we have hurricane, we have a tornado, we just got to make it that much better. So that way, yes, if it does come apart, we can put it back together fairly easily.
Right. The other
Not
thing,
take so
yeah,
much.
the other thing about architecture and different periods of time is that I think architecture during the decades and the different periods of time have a certain feel, a certain style,
True.
a certain the aesthetic, all the things that go into it, and it changes. It changes, right, as the years go by, and I wonder, does it change to meet the needs of the population that are going to inhabit it, or does it just change because new creative minds are on?
I mean, that makes you think of places like Rome, where the painting, and they spent months and years painting, and it still holds up today. And they'll go in there and they'll revarnish it, they'll repaint it, because that's the importance of it.
Right.
It's not so much that you need it there, but it's the person who did it or the reason why they did it. It's accurate to them, so they go in there and they take months and they'll close down the buildings so that way they can make sure everything is nice and good again. So yeah, I think it changes via the eras and the times, and definitely I would say back in the 1800s, back in Victorian, it was much more visually pretty because that's what they cared about. Today it's more, it can be pretty, but it's got to stand up. It's got to handle
it has to stand, and that's where the structural engineer comes in. But as I've watched a lot of Discovery Channel and all these shows that show how buildings are built. I guess how is it made, kind of thing, and they actually have connected the dots of some of the skyscrapers that we have here in our country, and how they connect to some of the skyscrapers that were built in other countries, and looking at the materials that were used,
way back,
way back, and translating it, and then making it better. So I love the fact that history moves forward with
and yet still uses its original source material, so to speak, to add it up. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you want good architecture outside of a book, visit one of those places. Rome is the place that basically invented all the things we have: walkways, aqueducts, buildings, generally. So you want to go to the source, go there. That's.
I mean, there's so many wonderful things
there. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I love this kind of nonfiction. I mean, like I said, we're going to go throughout the weeks into more other stuff. But I figured architecture. I just happened to come across it, and I was like, you know what? It's not.
And it's different everywhere. I mean, you just mentioned Italy, the beautiful architecture. Think about Greece. The architecture in Greece and all the little islands are completely opposite what you would see in the architecture that you see in the design that you see in Rome. I've had the pleasure of being to some of these places, and the buildings are all particular color, and they're one story, and they're long, and they're white, and they have it's totally different, and it gives you a totally different feel.
Yeah,
no, I'm on vacation. I know I'm on vacation when I see a house that is on, in Santorini or Naxos or Athens or wherever.
Right.
And I know that I'm actually as a tourist when I'm in Italy. It's in it versus outside looking at it. All right, so Rob, I know we're going to send them to multiple places that they can check out the Next Chapter Book Club. We're going to put some QR codes here right on the screen. The store has some amazing paperbacks and hardbound books. And remember, it's a used bookstore, so you're going to get great, great, great prices. Go ahead and scan that. It'll take you right into the bookstore. Also, comic books. If you're a comic book fiend, like Rob is, I think, you can go ahead and scan that and we'll take you there. And of course, I'm not wearing my shirt today, but when we come back into the picture, you'll see Rob is. We have a great a group of merchandise, including t-shirts and mugs and all sorts of other collectibles. So Rob, you have your shirt on.
I do. Very soft. I love it.
I forgot. Sorry.
It's okay.
So go check it out. Any last thoughts, Rob?
Just go get one of those books. It's more than just pretty pictures. It actually has a lot of really good information about it. So, yeah.
All right. See you next time.